All right, today we're going to talk about gallbladder polyps. Now, I know that term can sound a little intimidating, but you'll be surprised to learn they're an incredibly common finding on ultrasounds. We're going to break down exactly what they are, what they mean for you, and most importantly, how a new, smarter approach is totally changing the game for both patients and doctors.
So, let's set the scene. You go in for a routine ultrasound, right? Maybe for something completely unrelated. And then the report comes back and it mentions something you weren't even looking for, an incidental finding.
And that's the moment where, a little bit of anxiety can start to creep in. The doctor says, "We found a gallbladder polyp." And your mind just starts racing, right? What is that? Is it serious? What happens now? Well, that's exactly what we're here to clear up.
Okay, so to really get why the new approach is so great, we have to look at the old way of doing things, the polyp problem, if you will. For a long, long time, this super common finding was a real source of confusion and, honestly, a lot of anxiety.
And when I say common, I mean really common. We're talking about something found in anywhere from 3 to 6% of the general population. Think about that. That is millions of people walking around with these, and most of them have absolutely no idea.
So what even is a gallbladder polyp? Well, it's pretty simple actually. It's just a little growth on the inner lining of your gallbladder. But here is the most important part, the thing you really need to hear. The vast majority of these are just harmless little cholesterol polyps. They have zero potential to ever become cancerous.
And this is where you can really see the disconnect. The old approach, well, it was pretty aggressive. The thinking was better safe than sorry, which led to tons of follow-up scans and even surgery for any polyp over 10 millimeters. This created so much unnecessary anxiety and, as we now know, a whole lot of overtreatment.
And here is the piece of evidence that really changed everything. A huge study in 2020 dropped a bombshell. It found that the rate of gallbladder cancer in people with polyps was exactly the same as in people without them. I mean, wow, just having a polyp doesn't actually increase your overall risk. This one finding basically turned decades of medical practice on its head.
So with this new evidence piling up, the medical world knew something had to change. They needed a smarter approach, one that could cut down on all that anxiety and prevent unnecessary surgeries, but still, of course, keep patients perfectly safe.
And that new way forward came from a group of real experts, the Society of Radiologists in Ultrasound, or the SRU. They're the ones who took on this challenge. They waded through all the latest research to create a brand new, evidence-based path for everyone to follow.
All right, this is the good stuff, the core of it all. How do these new guidelines actually work? It turns out they're surprisingly simple and clear, and they really only hinge on a couple of key things.
And here it is. This is basically the new roadmap. This chart is the tool that radiologists use now. You can just forget that old one-size-fits-all approach. Now, everything boils down to two simple things that are easy to spot on an ultrasound: a polyp's shape and its size. So let's break that down.
First up, we have the most common category, which they call extremely low risk. And the SRU came up with this great, easy way to picture them. They call it the ball-on-the-wall appearance. It's basically a round little polyp attached by a super thin stalk. It almost looks like it's just kind of hanging there.
And here's what that looks like on an actual ultrasound. See? You can totally see that ball shape. Now, the guideline for these is just so reassuring. If you have one of these classic ball-on-the-wall polyps and it's 9 millimeters or smaller, the recommendation is simple. No follow-up needed. That's it. You're done.
Okay, the next category up is called low risk. These are what we call sessile polyps. So instead of that thin little stalk, these have a flat, broad base that connects them to the gallbladder wall. So think less like a ball on a string and more like a small, flat bump.
And here's what those look like. You can see how they're kind of flat against the wall, right? But hey, even for this shape, the news is still really, really good. If you have one of these sessile polyps and it's 6 millimeters or smaller, the recommendation is exactly the same. No follow-up is necessary. Again, you're good to go.
Look, at the end of the day, all these guidelines are designed to answer the one question that's on everybody's mind: what is the actual risk of cancer? So let's look at the hard data, the numbers that led to these much less aggressive recommendations. 0%. I'm going to say it again, 0.
A massive analysis back in 2014, which looked at a whole bunch of studies, found that the rate of gallbladder cancer in polyps that were 5 millimeters or smaller was 0. Not low, not rare, it was 0.
Okay, but what about the bigger ones?
Even for polyps over 10 millimeters, you know, the size that used to be an automatic let's talk surgery conversation, a huge 20-year study found the actual incidence of cancer was just 0.4%. I mean, that is incredibly low. It really puts the true risk into perspective.
Okay, let's wrap this all up. We've looked at the old problem, the new evidence, and these smarter guidelines. So what does all this mean for you?
Okay, here are the key takeaways. First, and this is the big one, the overwhelming majority of these things are totally harmless. Second, it's not about if you have a polyp, it's about its specific shape and size. Third, it's good to know that a tiny bit of growth, like 2 or 3 millimeters over time, can be totally normal. And finally, the bottom line of all of this, these new guidelines mean way fewer scans and way fewer unnecessary surgeries.
And really, that's the whole point, isn't it? This isn't about ignoring something, it's about reacting to it intelligently. The goal here is to give you peace of mind and to protect people from the stress, the physical, the financial, and the emotional stress that comes from over-investigation and over-treatment.
And this all leaves us with a really interesting question, doesn't it? This is just a perfect example of a bigger shift that's happening in medicine, where we're realizing that as we get smarter, the best move isn't always to do more. Sometimes it's about having the confidence in the evidence to safely do less. It really makes you wonder, right? How much of medicine is about figuring out where less is actually more?